We learned that the Chicago Street Race wouldn't be returning in 2026, but that the San Diego Naval Air Force Base Street Race would replace it. Well, we have another piece of the schedule that we have learned today. Mexico City made its NASCAR Cup Series debut this season, the first international points race in the modern era. However, it was short-lived, or at least they're taking a temporary halt for it. Chicagoland, though, that mile-and-a-half racetrack we haven't been to since 2019, will be the replacement. That is what is being reported by Jordan Bianchi at The Athletic. So, let's look at some of the details. NASCAR's Premier Cup Series will not return to Mexico City next year, leaving a spot on its 2026 schedule that is expected to be filled by the addition of a race at Chicagoland Speedway. Multiple sources briefed on the league's plans told The Athletic. Not going back to Mexico City leaves NASCAR without an international cup race in 2026, as the logistics of getting the series to the Autodromo Hermanos Rodriguez circuit in Mexico's capital, along with finding a date that works for NASCAR, the teams, and the track, proved challenging. In June, Mexico City became the site of the first Cup International points race since 1958. But that date is unavailable next year as Mexico City hosts the FIFA Men's World Cup soccer tournament with 5 matches scheduled from June 11th to July 5th. Both sides looking at a spring date, likely around the traditional Easter off weekend to give teams additional time to manage the travel, and even explored a possible NASCAR IndyCar doubleheader before NASCAR decided to turn its attention to finding a date for Mexico City on the 2027 schedule. Needing a replacement for Mexico City on its 38-race schedule, 36 points plus the All-Star and Clash, NASCAR is now solidifying plans to return to Chicagoland. The mile-and-a-half oval in Joliet, Illinois, about 50 miles from downtown Chicago, is owned by NASCAR. So NASCAR in Mexico, let's talk about that one first. Of course, this year was a huge year for NASCAR, going international with the Cup Series, as that said, for the first time since 1958 in terms of a points race. NASCAR's had a lot of getting out of their comfort zone, in a sense, over the last few years. Whether that's going to more road courses like the Circuit of the Americas, like Road America, having to use the Daytona road course to fill in some gaps during the COVID year. They've also kind of gone outside their comfort zones and they've tried new ideas, the Chicago Street Race, the LA Coliseum, but at the same time, they've gone back to their roots. They have gone back to some old traditional tracks, some historic tracks like North Wilkesboro and Bowman Gray Stadium. So they've done a really good job of appealing to like the old fan, the traditional fan who wants North Wilkesboro back, but also appealing to the newer fan, someone who doesn't know much about NASCAR or is newer to NASCAR, may like the road courses or may like a street course or trying something completely new like the LA Coliseum. So going to Mexico, going international was a goal of NASCAR. They were looking at Canada for a bit there. Ultimately, that fell through. They had to look at Mexico next. And here's the thing. The race was all right in Mexico. I think it was a really fun weekend for the NASCAR industry. To see NASCAR International was so cool. To see Mexico embrace NASCAR, to see the fans show up, to see the fans who don't usually get a chance to go to a NASCAR race because they're not really close to a NASCAR race. I think that was super cool to hear some of those stories from the fans who finally got to go to their first NASCAR race after all those years of not being able to because simply they're not close enough, as I said. I think NASCAR should continue to go international. Maybe it doesn't happen every year, but the fact of the matter is that there were some travel logistics that were quite difficult. And also the schedule this year did not help at all. I mean, the schedule, we went Michigan to Mexico to Pocono within a 3-week win. Like, we got to make it more realistic, I think. We got to go to Texas before, to Coda before. We got to make it a shorter trip. Less stress on the teams, less stress on the hauler drivers. We got to make that a little bit less stressful, if you ask me, because going from Michigan, I think it was like a 1.5-day drive just on road time. Like, that's not even including stops. That's not even including, overnight stays. Like, that was quite the difficult journey. And then you had to go back to Charlotte, and then going from Charlotte to Pocono, which I guess that's really not that long. That's only a few hours. But it's fresh off of a, 1.5 or however long it takes to get from Mexico to Charlotte. So as a result, because that is such a process, that is such a tedious process. There's so many logistics to file and logistics to do. And then there was also, on top of that, they had to deal with the plane issues that they had. And so a bunch of people didn't get in till the middle of the night, and like everyone was on 4 hours of sleep. Only a few team members per car because everyone else was delayed. There was a lot that happened. Okay, so to have that extra space on the calendar, to have that off week either on the front end or the back end to kind of ease the pressure, to kind of just back things off and say, hey, we got time. Hey, if something goes wrong, that's okay. We have an extra week. I think that would be for the better if NASCAR does indeed go back to Mexico. But the biggest hindrance for NASCAR going to Mexico in 2026 is the World Cup. That's ultimately it. I think if the World Cup's not happening next year, I think NASCAR finds a way to get Mexico on the schedule if they want to continue it in June, to get it during June and to kind of move the schedule around that. But ultimately, it doesn't matter if it's the Daytona 500. The World Cup's getting priority. That's the fact of the matter. So NASCAR was never going to get to Mexico City during any window of that World Cup. They were looking at the spring, potentially moving Mexico to the spring, but things didn't align. That's ultimately what happened. They were going to try to base it off of that Easter weekend, off weekend, and then do Mexico somewhere around there. Ultimately, the two sides couldn't agree. Hopefully, 2027, this can come back, and logistically, they can improve like they did at Chicago year over year. They kind of improved everything. So I hope NASCAR goes back, but ultimately, Chicagoland, I think, is a really good replacement because, as we've talked about before, the next-gen car is fantastic on the intermediate racetracks. Kansas, Charlotte, Vegas. It's even had some great races at Darlington. The next-gen car has been great on the intermediate racetracks, and Chicagoland, an intermediate racetrack, multi-grooved racetrack, kind of similar to Kansas, I would say. The expectation is going to be high for that race. The expectation is going to be for a crazy, epic race like we see at Kansas, at Charlotte, at Texas, at Vegas, at all these other intermediate tracks, mile-and-a-half tracks. There's going to be high expectations. They're going to have to touch it up a bit. They're going to have to get the lawnmower. They're going to have to, get some fresh paint. The place has been essentially abandoned. Carson Hocevar did a tour of it, but I think that Chicagoland, it's really cool to see Chicagoland back on the schedule, to see another mile and a half. And then another factor, with losing that Chicago street race, you've just gained a bunch of new fans in the Chicago area. You've got a bunch of people who have never seen NASCAR before, maybe been to one NASCAR race, maybe seen a couple races on TV. You got them to the race at the Chicago street race. They're really excited, had a great time. They want to go to another one. Well, Chicago is one of the biggest markets in the U.S., and you're leaving the Chicago street race. You can't abandon Chicago because then the next closest race is what? St. Louis? Indianapolis? That's a good chunk of travel. But if you give them Chicagoland, that's what? An hour? A little bit less than an hour? That's not bad at all. You can do an hour drive. That's not terrible. So point being, they're staying in the Chicago region, which I think is great. I think that's fantastic. They're bringing back Chicagoland, which once again, the next-gen car races fantastically on the intermediates. And losing Mexico sucks. It does suck if you ask me. But hopefully in 2027 they can get something figured out because once again, we're not beating the World Cup, guys. There's no situation where we beat the World Cup, especially in a foreign country. It's just not happening. Don't get your hopes up. Dale Jr. said this in response to this article, and this ain't the last big domino to fall, I hear. I have no idea what that means, but something with the schedule. I don't know. Maybe we're doing a street course in Antarctica. I'm just kidding. That's not happening. If you thought I was serious there. Whew. Anywho, then there's the whole debate about the road courses. Once again, I've said this before. I think 6 is the perfect number. It's a sixth of the schedule. You don't oversaturate it. I think 7's a little bit too much. I think 7's the absolute super duper max. But I think 5 is too few. 6 is truly the perfect number. And then going to 4, that's way too few. The way that the schedule has evolved, the way that we've adapted, I think the perfect schedule in terms of the road courses, you have one street race, you have one international race. We keep the 2 traditionals in Watkins Glen and Sonoma. keep COTA. I think COTA's been a great racetrack for NASCAR. I think it should be a staple on the calendar. Then that 6th race is kind of surprised me. Do what you want. Do you want to do the Chicago street race? Have 2 street races in a year? Sure. Let's do that every 3 years. You want to bring back Road America for a year? Sure. Let's do that. You want to go find another fun road course? Sure. Laguna Seca. You want to go do, I don't know, the Vegas F1 track. Okay, that's not realistic, but, I'm just throwing things out there. So I think 6 is the perfect number of road courses. But anywho, yeah, we've talked enough. But Chicagoland seemingly is back. Mexico is off for 2026. Schedule's getting pieced together. Curious to see what the whole thing's going to look like. So that should be fun. I don't know when it's going to come out. They always say it's a few weeks away, and then the next thing you know, it's been like 3 months, and they say it again, and you're sitting here confused. So I'm not going to get my hopes up. Thanks for watching this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. We have Iowa this weekend. Should be fun. Corn, punting, and I guess short track racing. So that's exciting.